Hi, my name is Claire. I'm 16. I'm just a normal teenager. Or I was, until recently. Have you ever dreamed of superpowers like those of comic book superheroes? Imagine that you have it, and because of this, life has become noticeably more difficult. Watch to the end, and you will learn how I learned to have X-ray vision. Recently, my mom and dad and I moved to a new house, and I had to go to a new school. I was very afraid that I would not be able to find friends quickly. I always thought I was a little strange and different from my peers. I often noticed that I had strange dreams, and that I could feel if a person next to me was sad or unwell. My strange sensitivity, as I called it, was always treated poorly by my classmates. This was because I once asked my classmate Jack to be careful on his bike on the way to school because I had a bad dream. I didn't know why I asked him so confidently, because it was just a dream. But on the way, his bike chain caught in his pants just like in my dream and he fell to the side of the road. Jack came up to me with a bandaged leg and gave me the honorific crazy. That's how it got to me. So I was afraid that history would repeat itself and decided to keep my mouth shut. But surprisingly, everyone in the class seemed to be happy with me and sometimes paid too much attention to me. I quickly became friends with the guys, and I even started to like school, which I had not noticed before. Do you quickly get used to new people? I finally started to understand biology, and I loved it so much that I wanted to go to medical school next year. It seemed that my life had changed a lot, and for the better. So I thought, until my crazy echo of the past caught up with me in the new place. In the morning, as usual, going to school, I realized that my eyes hurt a lot. I remembered the words of my beloved grandmother and blamed it on the computer in my life. My father didn't take me to school that morning because he had a bad stomach ache and didn't know what to do with it for 4 days. My mother nervously put me in my father's car and drove me to school. I saw how she was going through it, and I wanted to calm her down. I still don't know how I saw it, but when I looked at my dad, I saw that there was something wrong with his pancreas. It was highlighted brown on his stomach. I told my mother that. She pretended that I didn't say anything strange and just said, I guess I should check it out. I could see that she wasn't taking my words seriously, but Dad was in so much pain that he was ready to believe anything to make him feel better. And he was checked. Dad was diagnosed with pancreatic inflammation. He was urgently sent for surgery, and the doctor added that it was discovered just in time. At the hospital, my dad thanked me and said that I had the talent of a doctor. And I didn't know what to call it. I just saw what was inside him. Then I started to see what was inside the others. My classmate, Judy, had hernia in her back. The math teacher had heart failure. At first it was fun to watch other people's organs, how they moved, how they didn't look like each other. But then it started to make me afraid. Because I could see, but I couldn't tell. And the person was suffering. There was a feeling of impotence. But how? And most importantly, what do I say? Excuse me, I have X-ray vision and you should get your heart checked out because you have a blocked valve on the right ventricle of the heart. I would have laughed in the face of the person who told me this at best and at worst, handed them over to a mental hospital. After living like this for another 3 months, I realized that it was unbearable. I told my mother that I could see the organs of all the people around me. My mother always knew what to do, and I thought that here, too, she would find the perfect solution. And the next week, we went to a science center. At first, I thought we were just going to the doctor, until the door slammed and we were on opposite sides of that door with my parents. Great. At that moment, I felt that my parents had brazenly betrayed me. Where did they send me? What for? I was filled with resentment and fear. I did not understand what was coming. Experiments began on me. I was placed in solitary confinement as a criminal. There was a bed, toilet, TV, pillows, and food. Well, yes, I agree, not the most terrible cell of a prisoner. But it did not save me from the thought, when will all this end? Each morning began with tests, injections, and conversations with a man who called himself a doctor but confused medical terms. I hope he was just nervous. Then conversations with a psychologist about my childhood and parents. I didn't want to talk about them at all. Have you ever been very offended by your parents? Then you will understand for sure. The last straw of these incompetent experiments for me was the literal cruelty of the orderly. When I refused to take a pill, the employee hit me on the shoulder. I took the pill and realized that I had to run away from here. This was not easy because I was only allowed out on the street once a day at about noon and with a guard. I'm still sure that I was helped by some kind of miracle. Well, or hormones, because the guard was in love with the nurse and missed the moment of my escape. And now I was waving at him from the back of the gate. The problem with the terrible conclusion was solved, but I did not think where I would go after this prison. The only options I had were my parents, my grandmother, or an independent life. My parents might put me in that prison again, or I might become a tramp in a white shirt, which was not a pleasant prospect either. So it seemed that going to my grandmother was the only sensible and pleasant option. My grandmother welcomed me with joy. I told her everything I'd been through. She was angry and promised to scold my mother for doing this to me. Grandma is funny when she's angry, and I was glad that I found support in her. Everything seemed to start going as usual. I went back to school. I didn't miss much during the week. This week passed for me as a painful year, and everyone else in school had only 3 math lessons. And even these terrible pictures of sick people around me disappeared. I even wondered if I was imagining it. Then it was even more insulting that I was in this cage of torture for nothing. But I couldn't believe that these organs everywhere had stopped tormenting me. Just like I couldn't believe my grandmother had turned me in. She told my parents where I was. And here were my precious parents standing on the doorstep with a guilty face and thinking that I would forgive them just for showing up on the doorstep of a house where they were not expected. I looked at my grandmother with the question, "Why are you doing this to me?" She was the first to speak. She said that I got it wrong and my parents didn't know what I was going through. My mother continued and apologetically told how it really was. They took me to the examination and diagnosis of the brain to understand the cause of this phenomenon. They had no intention of dumping me on the test. Doctors, under the pretext of suspicion of brain disorders, urged my parents to leave me for free treatment. My parents got scared and of course they said yes. And only when they came home they began to suspect that something was wrong. Doctors did not give them the pictures of my head, refused to let them see me, and even took away my phone. My mother got scared and started coming to the hospital every day. The nurse, in confidence, said that I was missing. My mother almost turned gray in the emergency room. She began to swear and called for the chief doctor, but there was no answer. My grandmother made the responsible decision to tell her that I was fine. I suppose I would have done the same, though I thought it was unfair and cruel of her at the time. It was like my heart was released. I realized that no one had betrayed me, and my parents didn't get rid of me as a monster that could tarnish their reputation. They love me and really want to help. My mother was determined and went to court to deal with the offenders. I don't know exactly what happened with the pseudoscience center. My mother was happy, so she had won the court. From her, I learned what really happened to me. The whole story with X-ray vision turned out to be my wild imagination and passion for medicine, plus overwork. I wasn't even upset that I wasn't special anymore. It was important to me that I was finally free from torment and that I could help people with my talent to heal and not with my ability to see the invisible. And now I can say what and where it hurts, only sometimes using medical tricks. And I am already looking forward to my work as a doctor, which will help hundreds and hopefully thousands of people. If you like the story, please like it. And to see more of these stories, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate your uniqueness and believe that you are surrounded by good people.
I stood on the roof of the school and laughed out loud. There was a fire burning in my palm. And I slowly raised my hand up. Now everyone knows who Fire Girl is. Until a couple of weeks ago, everyone thought I was just a nerd. My younger brother Evan and I were late for class, and I took a sandwich out of my bag as I walked. I was about to hand it to Evan when someone snatched it out of my hand. It was Fat Joe. He took a big bite of the sandwich and told Evan that his nerdy sister wouldn't do anything anyway. The guys from Joe's gang laughed and left. I wanted to go to the principal, but Evan said he wouldn't help anyway. He'd already gone there. I was suddenly so hurt. I wish Dad was still alive. He would definitely protect us. When I entered the chemistry class, I saw the inscription nerd on my desk, and I could hear the laughter of my classmates from all sides. I didn't understand why I was so disliked at my new school. In the past, my dad always supported me on such occasions, but since he died, there's been no one to stand up for Evan and me. At the big break, I went out into the courtyard, but suddenly I saw a crowd of guys there. They were holding Evan and burning his backpack. I immediately rushed to my brother. I would definitely protect him this time, but the guys blocked my way and laughed mockingly. When the backpack burned down, Fat Joe told us not to relax. They would show me where Evan and I belong at this school, and they're gone. My brother and I were left alone, sobbing. I apologized for not being able to protect him, but my brother hugged me and said that it was alright. The guys were really stronger than us, and we were not superheroes. I took him to class and went back to the chemistry class. I couldn't concentrate in class. All I could think of was how to protect my Evan. I thought of my dad again. Thanks to him, I learned chemistry. He often said that chemistry was my superpower, and with its help, I would conquer the world. I wonder if chemistry could help me deal with abusers. And then I had an idea. But it had to be tested. So after school, I hid in the girls' locker room. Time was so maddeningly slow. But when the guard finally left, I tiptoed into the chemistry room. I carefully locked the door and exhaled. I took out the necessary reagents and mixed them down. The liquid boiled, then covered with a crust of ice, and then it began to thicken. A drop fell on the table, and it began to melt. Wow, it was a good thing that I understood chemistry and knew how to handle this mixture. It could easily leave a burn. But I couldn't go everywhere with the flask. And then I noticed a rubber glove on the table. I put it on, carefully touched the liquid, and hooray! The rubber did not burn through. What if my hand became my weapon? And I completely dipped it in the solution. The next morning, the bullies were waiting for us outside the school. But this time, I was ready to meet them. I gathered all my willpower, jumped up to the fat guy, and abruptly pressed my hand to his cheek. The boys roared with laughter, but the fat guy suddenly screamed. The skin on his cheek was red, and there were huge blisters on it. His friends screamed in horror and ran away. Evan looked at me with admiration, and I was elated. I did it! As soon as we got home, Evan ran straight to his room and made something there for a long time. And then he brought me wings in the shape of fire. He said I was his new superhero. Fire Girl, and every superhero should have a cool costume. And you're right. I could become a real superhero. I was so excited by this that I immediately ran to the bathroom. It was good that my knowledge of chemistry was enough to make a real hair dye. So, an hour later, I came out with fiery red curls. I even felt more confident. Evan said that our mom would appreciate it, and immediately became sad. We hadn't seen much of her since our dad died, because she was always working. I hugged Evan and told him that we would always be together, and now I could protect him. In the morning, Fat Joe's gang was waiting for us outside the house. I put on my suit and gloves and went out to them. Apparently, they wanted to avenge yesterday. Well, if you didn't have enough, there you are. And as soon as they reached for me, I touched each of them with quick movements of my hands. They screamed so much. You'll know I'm a fire girl now. The one who protects the weak. When Evan and I arrived at the school, everyone greeted me with a round of applause. It turned out that someone had recorded me dealing with Fat Joe's scam, and now the fire girl was the star of the school. I couldn't believe it, because just yesterday, everyone was laughing at me and calling me nerd. Requests for help poured in from all sides. Then I decided to start a Fire Girl Instagram, and during the day, more than 100 messages were collected in direct. It turned out that there was so much evil in the school. I realized I had to protect the weak now. Every day I punished the bullies in the cafeteria, on the football field, at recess. Fire Girl could protect everyone. After that, the students began to tell their friends about me, and soon the whole city knew about me. After a couple of weeks, the name Fire Girl was already in the front pages of the newspapers. Drunk driver got what he deserved, Fire Girl punished the thief. I boasted to Evan that I had made the city a better place to live. At first, he was happy for me, but one day, when I got home late one more time, Evan said that because of my superhero activities, I not only put the school on hold, but also rarely communicated with him. Evan, it's not like that at all. Then he suggested that we played something together, like before. I agreed, but not for long. After all, I had a lot of requests in direct. We sat down on the console and began to play. The hero's hands were on fire, and I thought, if only Fire Girl could do this, then it would be so much easier to fight evil. And then I had an idea. I told Evan we'd finish playing later, and then I ran to the chemistry room. Fortunately, the door was open. I knew what to do. All I had to do was find the right reagent. Carefully, I added a few drops to my mixture. It burst into a bright flame. But it didn't burn me at all. Yes! Now I will be able to protect not only your city, but the whole world. I went back and wanted to show it to Evan, but he was already asleep. However, I found a note on the door of my room. I'd like to see my sister more often. I was angry. How could he be so selfish? Other people actually needed help too. A message came to direct. So I immediately turned on the news. What was it? On TV, I saw the tearful wife of the famous millionaire. It turned out that her husband put her out on the street with a child. It was just a disgusting act. I couldn't wait to punish him. I ran to the millionaire's house where a crowd of journalists had already gathered. And here he was. Just the sight of him made my stomach boil. I slammed my fist down on the fence. And suddenly a spark from my palm spread to the dry branches nearby. The fire began to flare up, and a few seconds later, the house began to burn. Oh no! The reporters immediately turned the cameras on me. The reporter asked sharply, why did I, the savior of the city, set fire to the house of an innocent man? I didn't know what they were talking about. And then the journalist said that the millionaire's wife had just admitted on camera that she had lied and just wanted to frame her husband. Then I was taken aback. The journalists immediately bombarded me with questions and I had to run. My Instagram direct was also bursting with angry messages. Hey, but I tried so hard for you, and this millionaire was to blame for everything. Furious, I went home, and Evan yelled at me. He said that he had seen the footage and asked how I could have done it without understanding the situation. Stupid boy, can't he see that without me, the city would be mired in crime? How can one mistake negate all good things? But he left, slamming the door. Heck, it was necessary to switch somehow. I went to Instagram, but all haters were there. Suddenly, in one message, I saw a photo of our principal on the roof of the school. Anonymous wrote that he was hiding something illegal there. It's a go! I would punish the principal, and so I would prove to everyone that Fire Girl was on the guard of the city and they could rely on her. I immediately ran to the school. At the bottom was a crowd of students. Strange, what were they doing here? There was no time to sort it out. I went up to the roof and saw the principal there. Now you will be responsible for everything. I held out my hand with the flame burning on it. No one escapes justice, but suddenly I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw my brother. What was he doing here? Evan suddenly started begging me to stop. I pushed him away. Stay out of adult business. But suddenly, what was it? I heard a high-pitched scream. It was Evan. Because of my push, he lost his balance and fell off the roof. I immediately went down the fire escape and prayed that he was alright. I pushed through the crowd of students and tried to feel for a pulse. "Come on, Evan. Come on." I clung to him and heard a faint moan. He was breathing. He was very lucky he fell on some soft bushes. Then the principal ran up to us and called an ambulance. I shouted that if it wasn't for his dirty deeds, nothing would have happened to my brother. But he just looked at me in surprise and said that he wanted to make a holiday on the roof of the school. I suddenly felt dizzy. God, was I wrong again? The doctors put Evan in the car and we drove to the hospital. I took off my fire glove and squeezed my brother's hand tightly. As we drove, I noticed a ruin sitting in the window. It looked like someone had tried to burn it. And then it hit me. It was me. I was so busy playing superhero that I didn't even notice how much damage I'd done. Tears welled up in my eyes. "Evan, if you could just wake up, I'd do it differently." Suddenly, he opened his eyes. How happy I was. I leaned into him and whispered softly that the only thing I wanted now was to be a good sister to him. Evan smiled at me, and I gave him a big hug. Everything went dark before my eyes. I tried to take my last breath, but my lungs filled with water. That seems to be the end. The last thing I remembered was how I slowly sank to the bottom of the pool and passed out. A sinking mermaid. What a stupid situation. I just wanted attention because my parents ignored me since childhood. I dreamed of having millions of subscribers, but I barely had 100 on my blog in 3 years. I complained to my parents, but they only waved their hand and left to hang out. Because I was born when they were teenagers, Mom and Dad didn't get enough of it. But I can do anything without them. I constantly monitored trends and so came across on YouTube on a show of people with superpowers. But when I saw the account of the winner, Fire Girl, my jaw almost dropped. She kept fire in the palm of her hand and was not burned. That Fire Girl gained 1 million subscribers in a couple of days. Then I decided that I would come up with a superpower and I would become popular. The whole next week, I was making something up, hiding lighters in my sleeves, trying to break the table, but nothing worked out. In fact, what power are we talking about? If I spent all my time at school and swimming training, that's it! Swimming, I couldn't control the water, but what if I would become a mermaid? I bought different fabrics and quickly made a tail, and after that, I posted several videos in the image of a mermaid, but there was only hatred in the comments. How so? You can't break me easily. I said it when I got into salt water. I became a mermaid, and on land, I was a regular person. I decided to record the video to prove it, then I went to the pool near the house. But as soon as I put on my tail and filmed how I added salt to the water, somebody knocked on the gate. Who's there? Parents left for some party for the weekend. Suddenly, some dude with a camera tumbled into the yard. Seeing me, he stared and then clapped with delight. He said he was the director of a show about superhumans. Wow, he saw my channel and decided that he wanted to make a live stream about the life of a mermaid. A live stream? I couldn't believe my ears. The director went on, "A week live and you'll be like a fire girl, honey. You're a real mermaid, aren't you? Prove it to the audience, and you will be a star." I already imagined millions of subscribers and immediately agreed. But as soon as the director left, I realized that I was in over my head. How was I supposed to prove it? The audience would look at my every move. I didn't sleep all night and decided to prepare in advance. And when the crew arrived, I was already in the pool. The director was thrilled with the tricks in the water, but shaggy cameraman Rick was scowling at me. And then the director said it was necessary to show the audience something unique. I had to demonstrate how my legs turned into a tail. I was a real mermaid after all, not a girl in a suit. I seriously panicked and answered that I was tired. Maybe we'll continue tomorrow. The director reluctantly agreed, and I was relieved. There was time to think. But the cameraman Rick hissed that he had been working on the show for years and knew that there were no miracles and I was lying. I felt the chills run up my back. Did he want to reveal me? It was uneasy all evening. How could I show that my legs would become a tail? And by midnight, I had an idea. In the morning, I got up before everyone else and glued my tail to the pool wall. Just wanted it all to work out. Filming soon began. I said in a trembling voice that I would now show what no one had seen before, turning my legs into a tail, and sat down on the edge of the pool, lowering my legs above the tail. Be calm, Una. The main thing was to do it neatly. I simultaneously climbed into the tail and fell into the water. I got it! But it was too early to rejoice. I realized that I couldn't make a move. The tail got stuck on the edge. That's the end. I jerked. There was a sound of torn fabric. Everyone heard it. But the director only clapped his hands. It seemed he didn't notice anything. All day, Rick was glaring at me, and in the evening, he suddenly declared he read that mermaids have a beautiful voice. I just had to sing for the audience. To my horror, the director picked up on this idea. So tomorrow, I had to charm everyone with my singing. God, I can't hit the notes. After filming, when everyone left, I took my tail off in a moment. Damn, it was torn. I rushed into the room and started to sew the tail, if no one could see it. Then I started surfing the internet. It was past midnight and I needed to find a suitable voice. I downloaded a relatively good record and in the middle of the night, pulled speakers out of the living room to the backyard. I hope no one notices me lip-syncing. I opened my eyes from a persistent knock on the door. Hell, I forgot to set the alarm and overslept. I always got up before the crew came to discreetly put on the tail, and now there were a lot of people in the yard. I shouted to the director that I was warming up. It took time, and rushed back to look for the tail. I think I put it in the wash yesterday. Damn. I burst into the bathroom and immediately opened the washing machine, but that turned out to be empty. I was in panic. Someone stole my tail. Probably this Rick decided to set me up. I went back to my room and almost screamed with despair. Farewell, my dream of popularity. And then my gaze fell on the balcony, where things were drying. My heart almost stopped. Among the bedding hung my tail. What? And then I remembered that I did it myself. Because of lack of sleep, I managed to forget about it. Now it was necessary to distract everyone somehow while I was taking it off. I looked under my legs and saw a pebble. The next second, it flew straight into a tripod standing under the balcony. The camera with a rumble fell on the ground. While the team hastily collected the equipment, I yanked my tail, ran into the yard, and wearing it, jumped into the pool. Trying to hide the excitement, I got the remote, which I hid in the fence, and turned on the speakers. A singer's voice rang out over the whole yard. I opened my mouth to the song, and even for a second, I believed that I was singing myself. How suddenly the column fell silent. I froze. Feeling the heart jumping out of my chest, the team looked at me with anticipation. Then I coughed and sang the phrase myself. I thought it was the end, but the director suddenly started applauding me. The whole team applauded. The director said that he had never seen mermaids. But after my performance, there was no doubt that I was real. By the evening, when the team started to pack things, Rick approached me. He grinned discontentedly that it would be over soon. But not in the way I thought it would be. A shiver ran through my body. What's he up to? Then Rick stated that on the final day, I would have to show the real life of the mermaid. I would have to spend a day underwater. What? I protested, but the director supported Rick again. Within myself, I wailed with despair. But there was no choice. World glory was at stake. A little more and I'm there. So in the middle of the night, I went to my parents' garage. My mother said she was diving, and I really needed help. I was sorting the boxes for a long time, but there was only trash. In despair, I was ready to break down. But then I propped up against the closet. The door opened, and I saw an oxygen cylinder inside. The size was suitable. I could hide it in a tail. If only there was enough oxygen for a day. In the morning, I was shaking with tension, but immersed myself in the water, trying to stretch an oxygen tube through the swimsuit. Una, you can do it. A day underwater. That's okay. The first time was not difficult. I showed tricks and depicted a happy face. But then the operator called me on the surface. I'll finally exhale. I surfaced, and he only mockingly asked, "The mermaid did not go hungry?" And then he handed me algae. The director agreed with him. I was a mermaid and would eat them underwater. It was so nasty. I tried to chew and breathe through the tube at the same time, and all because of Rick. When half an hour was left before the end of the life, oxygen was almost at zero. I tried to take shallow breaths, but the director asked me to show the signature somersault under the water. Suddenly my head was swirling and I grazed the tube with my hand. Not that! I tried to breathe in and froze. Oxygen did not go. Oh no, did I really damage the tube? It was impossible to retreat. It was necessary to hold out at all costs. Only 7 minutes to go. I held my breath for as long as I could, but suddenly everything around started to go dark. The last thing I remembered was how I slowly sank to the bottom of the pool and passed out. I woke up in the hospital room. I came to my senses for a long time when I noticed the phone on my bedside table. With trembling hands, I opened the show on YouTube. It was scary, but I wanted to know what happened. I thought I was hated, but I was surprised when I started reading comments. The video had already been watched by 6 million people. The audience wrote that they were worried about me and loved me very much for bravery. It didn't matter that I was not a real mermaid. It was important that I wasn't scared to overcome myself and become her. Tears welled up in my eyes, so I can be interesting without the tail? At this point, my parents rushed to me, but they had to be at the party. I thought I would get a scolding, but instead, Mom and Dad hugged me. Mom kissed me. She was very scared and asked me why I made it up. I did not hold back tears. I just wanted someone to need me. Dad sighed and said it was their fault. They should have paid me more attention, rather than trying to catch up on youth at hangouts. Now they saw how I needed their support and love. When I was discharged from the hospital, my parents took me to the sea for me to rest. Now I had a lot of subscribers, all asking when a new life would be. But I said I was not up to it yet. It was important now to spend time with my family. Later, I got a call from Rick. He regretted that it came out like that. He thought about the show and never wanted anything bad to happen to me. At this point, I realized that it was stupid to suspect Rick. We laughed at the story for a long time, and then Rick wished me luck, saying that after meeting me, he believed in a miracle. On the last evening before leaving, I decided to swim in the sea, but as I entered the water, my legs began to tingle. I looked down and didn't believe my eyes. Can't be! There was a tail in place of my feet! Real! I was blown over. It turns out, miracles happen. You only need to believe in them with your best. I ran to a city bridge and suddenly had a strange thought. I just felt like I wanted to end all this. I sat down at the very edge and watched the water for a long time. It seemed to hypnotize me. Since I was a little girl, I knew I had superpowers, just nobody understood this. That day, I was about to go to school for the first time. I was so nervous. My mom and I spent a whole month choosing an outfit for me. But just before I left, I reached for my favorite toy, Ricky the unicorn, anyway. I would be less scared with him, as I never leave home without Ricky. Hey, what are you doing? You're a grown-up girl already. My mom wondered. No one can be too grown-up for unicorns, I replied. But when I entered the class, trembling in worry, I indeed saw I definitely did not look as a grown-up girl. And the unicorn was not the only reason. It seemed everyone was a couple of years older than me, and I looked like a baby. Maybe that was the reason no one wanted to play with me that day. I hugged Ricky and could barely hold the tears back. I decided I would not tell my classmates about my superpower yet. You just need to grow up a little bit, my mom said as I returned home, but that did not help. A couple of years later, I still looked the same little girl, and my classmates still did not want to be friends with me. They kept on calling me mocking names, and I could not understand where to run from that all. Ricky remained my best friend, my only friend. One day, when I was getting ready for school, my mom said that we were going to a different place instead. Hooray! I jumped into the car without even asking where we were going. Anything would be better than school and my classmates. But soon my joy subsided, because we stopped at the doors of a hospital. Mom, why are we here? I'm scared. The doctor turned out to be very cool. He asked me questions and even patted Ricky. Finally, someone liked my unicorn too. The doctor said something to my mom, and she shrunk. She tried to retell me the doctor's words at home. Yes, indeed. That was exactly the way I felt. But it was my superpower. The next day, I was eager to go to school. Just as I entered the class, I immediately told everyone that my superpower was called autism. That is why I was different from you. And this did not mean... At the same moment, they started to laugh at me even worse. What superpower? You're just demented. They shouted from every corner. I could not understand why they were doing this to me. Everything suddenly became too bright, too close, too loud. No, I can't stand this. I ran home. I'd spent the entire evening in my room. It was hard to speak, even to Mom. I just didn't know what to do. But by the next morning, I was sure I needed to appease my classmates. That could not go on the same way anymore. The next day, I came to class with a huge box of donuts. My heart was breaking my ribs. I put the box on one table and gestured everyone to try the donuts. But anyone did not even move. I swallowed nervously. Suddenly, one girl approached the box cautiously. Yes, try it. I will be your friend. But then Ralph, the main bully of our class, bawled out. Do you really want to be friends with this defective one? Hey, what is going on here? I was so tense I could not even speak. Suddenly, Ralph came to my box and turned it over demonstratively. All the donuts fell onto the floor. Why? My world seemed to collapse. I found it hard to breathe, to speak, to be. I could not understand why I was like that. Why were they mocking my superpower? For the next few days, I did not leave home. All the time I was collecting the specks of strength to try again. Finally, I came to school and tried to behave as all the others did, as if I had no superpower. I tried so hard, but folks only laughed at me even more. Especially that jerk Ralph. It hurt so much. One break, Ralph approached me. I had a bad feeling, but there was nowhere to run. I took a deep breath. Hey, little one, still trying to be like all the others? He pointed out nastily. I was silent. Then why still carry that toy? Give it. And he took my Ricky. No, not him. I was suffocating in helplessness. I felt so awful. Why does not anyone want to be my friend? I fled and ran as long as I could. Oh, why am I like that? For all my life, I believed I had a superpower. But why would I need it if it only makes everything worse? I'd run to a city bridge and suddenly had a strange thought. I just felt like I wanted to end all this. I sat down at the very edge and watched the water for a long time. It seemed to hypnotize me. This won't hurt. This. A hand landed on my shoulder. I shuddered and turned around. Mommy, how did you find me? I had almost... Mom hugged me close to her. Sorry. I'm sorry. I just didn't know what to do. It's all right, she whispered. I'd like to introduce you to someone. After that, we were driving for a long time. I was afraid to say anything. I felt that I disappointed my mom. That I disappointed everyone. But when we arrived, at first I could not even believe my eyes. Everyone there had superpowers. Yes, that was the place for me. That was a school for true superheroes. A boy approached me right away and gave his hand to greet me. Everyone was finally willing to become friends with me. I know many people think my superpower is an illness, but it's not like that. I am able to love and be loved, just doing it in a big different way. And to be my friend, you don't have to do much. Just loving unicorns is enough. I came to myself in a room with dim lights. My head was pounding horribly. What am I doing here? I tried to stand up, but I felt the straps under the sheet. What was going on? Suddenly, a disheveled old man in a scientist's robe ran up to me. The old man with the mad look said that now it was possible to start experiments and left the room in a hurry. My stomach went cold. I pulled my hand up with all my might, and the straps began to creak. I yanked my hand again and the strap snapped. Wow, how strong I am. It's better to leave this place. I ran into the hallway in just a sheet. Creepy scientific instruments hung everywhere. What was he doing here? I already saw the exit, but suddenly I noticed in the mirror that the sheet had fallen off me. What's the matter with me? I stepped closer, dropped the sheet to the floor, and was speechless. I looked like some kind of robo-monster. 85% of my body was made of iron and parts connected by wires. But I had a human head. But then I heard the scientist's voice behind me. Where are you going? Panic seized me, and I ran for the door as fast as I could. The old man ran after me. It seemed that he was about to grab me. Out of desperation, I hit the door with my shoulder and it flew out with a crash. I didn't know where to run because I didn't even remember where I lived. Random passersby shouted at my back that I was a freak. I ran to a parking lot, hid among the cars, and looked around. There was no pursuit. The thought of this creepy scientist catching me made me feel uneasy. I sat in the parking lot until the evening and did not dare to go out. I looked at the cars and realized the last thing I remembered was getting into an accident. And I was in a wedding dress, but I didn't know if I was a robot even then. My memories were very fragmentary, but if I had a wedding, then there was a groom. That's something. I needed to find him somehow. Only he could help me remember who I really was. Night fell, and I ventured out of my hiding place to find a quieter place. Suddenly, a red light flashed on my chest. I didn't notice it at first, but soon my vision began to darken. Maybe I was running out of charge. Like on my phone, I needed to try to charge myself. Oh man. Then an electric car passed me noiselessly. I barely managed to jump away, but stop. It was also somehow charged. I needed to find an electric vehicle charging station urgently. With the last of my strength, I trudged along the road. I thought I was going to pass out when I saw the lights of a station in the distance. If only they had electric recharging points. I quietly crept up to the station, looked around, and saw no wires, only hoses with gasoline. I was desperate, but suddenly, in the corner, I noticed a place with a wire. The station attendant was asleep behind the cash register. I crawled over to the wire, pulled it out, and plugged it into the socket on my chest. And wow, it fit! The light stopped blinking, and I felt my strength returning. But then a car pulled up at the station and shone its headlights on me. Heck! I looked around. The station attendant woke up and already noticed me. I didn't want to be arrested for theft. I took off, and in a couple of seconds, I was already very far away. When I was sure there was no pursuit, I stopped and sat down on the bench. Did I have to steal electricity from stations for the rest of my life now? In my desperation, I did notice a guy walking up to me. I wanted to run away, but he began to examine me with the words, "Wow, what a costume. What was he talking about?" Suddenly, the guy asked me for a link to my TikTok. What is TikTok? The guy laughed and showed me the app and two favorite accounts, Mermaids and Fire Girl. Popular superheroines. He decided that I was the same. I refused, but the guy thought I was being modest and still took a picture with me. I couldn't believe that someone would like me, because a bunch of people on the street just called me a monster. When he left, I thought about what he'd said. If this mermaid succeeded, I could also become famous, and then the groom from my past would see me and find me. This was the only way I could find out who I really was, a robot or a human, but I needed to get money for the phone. The next day I went to the park. I decided to take a picture with the children for money. The guy wanted a picture with me. At first, no one approached me, and I already thought that this was a stupid idea. But gradually, a whole queue was lined up for me. It turned out people love robots. But several times the kids called me a transformer. I tried not to pay attention, and by the end of the day, I had enough money for a smartphone. The next day, I registered in TikTok and made a couple of videos about my life. I was so worried when I uploaded them. But in vain, 500 people subscribed to me every day. A few weeks later, I was already one of the most popular bloggers and was even able to rent an apartment. I didn't think it would be so easy. People wrote hundreds of comments, but no one from the previous life ever appeared. And I so wanted to know, was I a robot or was I originally born a human? I didn't even know who I was. But in any case, I knew I had feelings, but the fans were only interested in how I changed and whether I can touch the water. Once, a follower with the nickname Joker asked how my mood was. I was surprised, because everyone thought that robots were not in the mood by 85%. The Joker almost immediately offered to meet and I agreed. He spoke to me as if I were an ordinary person. The very next day, I was waiting for him in the cafe, and then a guy sat down at my table and introduced himself as the Joker. His face was scarred, and I was terrified. He immediately reached out to me and began to repeat, "Don't leave me. I love you." Hell, he was a psychopath. I mumbled that I had a lot to do and ran as fast as I could. The Joker started writing to me on all social media, but I blocked him everywhere. That's it! No more face-to-face meetings with fans. I kept using TikTok, hoping that someone from my past would notice me. But nothing happened. One day, I was returning home from an autograph session and suddenly I heard someone's footsteps. I turned around and saw a dark silhouette. I picked up the pace, but someone was shouting after me, "We need to talk." Oh no, it's the Joker, the crazy fan. I quickly ran back to the house and locked the door. Was he following me? The Joker was shouting something under the windows, but I didn't dare look out. With shaking hands, I called the police, and an hour later, a couple of big guys arrived and dragged the Joker away. I let out a sigh of relief and tried to sleep. This was already dangerous. I needed to delete TikTok and find another way to find out the truth about my past. The next day, I went to a fan meeting. There, I decided to say that I was done with TikTok and directly asked for help from my followers. When everyone gathered, I took a deep breath and said, "Friends, I don't really remember anything from my past. I don't know if I'm really a robot or a human." The room fell silent. I probably shouldn't have said that, but suddenly the audience burst out laughing. From all sides, it was hurt. She hypes! I had never felt so hurt in my life. In desperation, I ran to the back exit. None of the fans believed me. What a fool I was. When I opened the back door, I bumped into someone. I started to apologize, but then I was taken aback. This was the scientist. He looked even more creepy than he had a month ago. I backed away, but he pulled the remote out of his pocket and pressed the button. I immediately collapsed to the ground. What was going on? I couldn't even move. The scientist took my hand and dragged me along the ground. "Help me!" But no one heard my screams. I was finished. The scientist loaded me into his car and, muttering that the experiments were not over yet, got behind the wheel. The last thing I saw was the confused Joker sitting in the car outside the club. At that moment, the red light on my chest flashed again, and I blacked out. I came to myself in the same room. The scientist muttered softly that he was disappointed with my behavior. "I hope the next model will be more accommodating," he added. The scientist took out a saw and held it into my lap. Just a little bit and he would cut me into pieces. "No, please." But suddenly I heard some noise. The door opened and the Joker ran into the room. Behind him, the crowd of my fans was roaring. I couldn't believe my eyes. The fans threw the scientist to the floor and tied him up. The Joker took the remote out of his pocket and turned on my body. I didn't understand anything. Why would he do this? He was my crazy fan. But the Joker asked abruptly, "Don't you recognize me, Jen?" I frowned, puzzled. "What are you talking about?" The Joker smiled and said his name was Kyle. He was my groom. And I was kidnapped on my wedding day. These words made my throat go dry. So I was looking for him all this time. Kyle told me that we had loved each other since childhood and wanted to get married. But on the day of the wedding, we had an accident. Kyle was saved and he escaped with scars. And then he stopped talking. What happened to me? Kyle hesitated and said, "And you died right at the scene of the accident." I couldn't believe it. But how? Here I stand. I'm alive. Kyle said that before the funeral, my body was stolen and he tried to find me, but in vain. He no longer believed that he would succeed, but suddenly he saw an interview with a robot that had my face. He thought he was imagining it, but he found me in TikTok and was stunned. I was alive. Tears welled up in my eyes, and suddenly I saw in the disfigured face of the Joker my dear Kyle, whom I had loved so much all my life. Oh, Kyle, it's so good that you found me. A few months later, we got married. Our wedding was discussed by the whole country. After that, twice as many people followed me, but I didn't care anymore. It was enough for me to have one person who saw me not as a freak from TikTok, but as an ordinary girl who also had feelings. I looked at Kyle and saw the most beautiful man on earth without even noticing the scars on his face. After all, love and kindness, that's what makes us truly beautiful.